Welcome. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a condition called endometriosis, why you should care, telling you a bit about Endometriosis Awareness Month, which is March, and I'll talk a bit about a charity called Endometriosis UK, my experience of living with endometriosis, and how you can support other women like me who live with this condition. Welcome to my channel, Dr. Maggie Prevent. My name is Dr. Margaret Gani. I am a consultant psychiatrist living and working in the UK. This channel talks a lot about my career transition from a mainly clinical one to a more preventative one, but it also shares other things about mental health and things that happen in my life in general. And so, since March is Endometriosis Awareness Month, I will be talking about endometriosis. So, I will refer to some of the information from a charity called Endometriosis UK, and I'll try and drop the link in the comments. Now, Endometriosis UK is a fantastic charity with lots of helpful information, and they have published a press release about Endometriosis Awareness Month and talked about how about 54% of people don't know about this condition. Now, what's endometriosis, right? Um, Endometriosis UK describes it as a long-term condition which is tissue similar to the lining of the womb grow in other parts of the body, right? And it can be painful and have a really horrible impact on a woman's opportunities, her education, her career, her quality of life, her well-being. And Endometriosis UK mentions that this condition is as common in women as things like diabetes and asthma. It affects 1.5 million women in the UK, right? And since 54% of people don't know what endometriosis is, it does seem like it's worth talking about. This month, one of the things Endometriosis UK is supporting, it's calling for the public, healthcare professionals, policymakers, charities, and others to come together to raise awareness of the condition, its symptom, and its impact on people's lives. And so, what's my story? I am many things, right? I'm a woman, a Christian, a sister, an auntie. I'm Nigerian. I'm also British. I'm a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, public health professional, cognitive analytic therapist, preventative mental health psychiatrist, to name a few. No, to name most of them. But I am also a woman who lives with an extremely debilitating version of endometriosis. I got diagnosed in my early 30s, I believe, but I had lived with the effects of this condition, I believe, from my teens, and it presented with painful periods, which resulted in me not being always able to attend classes or to do other things, but it just seemed like, okay, maybe I was one of those girls who had really painful periods. It was helpful to finally get a diagnosis, which was done via surgery. While I went through a number of assessments and investigations, this was diagnosed via surgery, as tends to happen for most women, the confirmatory diagnosis. Unfortunately, in the course of my gynecological journey, I have also been diagnosed with other conditions that tend to co-occur for some women with endometriosis, things like adenomyosis, fibroids, but I won't go into those details. I want to share my own story and what the impact has been on me. Living with a condition like endometriosis is a very unique experience for every woman who has it. There are some women who have really mild versions who go on to live pretty regular lives without this condition impacting them too severely. And then there are others like me who experience what can feel like an outsized impact of the condition. But still, I choose to be thankful because I still get to do things. I can still have gotten to, study and work and make progress because there are women who are even more significantly affected by this condition than me, and are totally out of work, and are, much more debilitated than I am. For me, it went from painful periods, and so maybe 1 week a month was quite challenging, and for the rest of the month I was able to function, mostly normally. And then I started to have premenstrual issues, which many women have, just live with or get through or take something for. But for me, the premenstrual issues were pretty bad. I think it was premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Um, and so that meant that I was now quite uncomfortable and unwell for about 2 weeks every month. And this was with interventions by doctors, assessments, medication, and all that sort of thing. And when I had my third surgery for this condition, prior to the surgery, I was on 6 months of hormonal injections, which tends to happen for women with many gynecological conditions. These hormonal injections help to, manage the condition, maybe shrink whatever is presenting, and make it more manageable by the time you go into surgery. And I should note here, while I am a medical doctor by background, my specialty is psychiatry. So if you want an academic, professional perspective on endometriosis, you should probably go listen to a gynecologist. I'm coming from a lived experience perspective as somebody who has lived with this condition. And so I was talking about how after my third surgery a number of years ago, um, it took me a while to recover. And initially my doctors thought it was just, prolonged recovery from surgery. Sorry, I'll just put this fan off. My doctors thought it was a prolonged recovery from surgery. But then it was taking a while, and so a number of investigations and assessments were done. And eventually I was diagnosed with what they called endometriosis related fatigue, which was new to me. Apparently, my gynecologist told me that some women with endometriosis develop a significant fatigue, and it's not chronic fatigue syndrome, right? It's not ME, it's not CFS. It is its own thing. However, the management is similar to chronic fatigue syndrome management. So pacing, keeping in mind boom and bust, and all those other bits, those lovely things. And the introduction of fatigue into what I was handling meant that I was now having to deal with not just, maybe a couple of weeks where I was struggling, but that for a lot of the month, I was struggling either with pain or fatigue. It was recommended by one of the medical professionals involved in my care that I go part-time. Um, and working part-time was something I never saw myself doing. But I tried it, and it meant that I stopped being off sick as often as I had been. Because, I had the surgery, got better a bit, but kept having relapses. And so with the diagnosis of the endometriosis related fatigue, my putting in place measures to manage that, and my doctors recommending certain things, one of which was go part-time. I went part-time, and I seemed to cope better. Although going part-time meant I was earning less because my salary was prorated, and I was doing my residency, so it had an impact on my residency. Because while a fantastic thing about training in the UK, I can't, speak for all other countries in the world, but residency in the UK, you can do it part-time. It's referred to as less than full-time. But obviously it will take you longer because you're working, in a week for less time, formally. And so I had to make peace with the fact that my residency was going to take me longer than I initially thought. But it was okay. I had already done my membership exams. I had my membership of the Royal College of Psychiatrists by then, I believe. And so I continued with life and residency and working part-time and trying to figure out what my new normal was. Now, all this was challenging for me because, as I said earlier, I am a Christian. And I prayed a lot about this condition, in addition to taking medicines, treatments, um, trying to take all the vitamins and so on that, could help with my health, trying to live healthily. But it seemed that no matter what I did, I didn't get better, which was very disappointing. It challenged my faith. Why was it that I saw other people who prayed about things and they got answers, and I had prayed about things in my life and gotten answers, but when it came to endometriosis, the answers were seemingly few and far between. And it has been a journey of making peace with the fact that despite my believing in God as a Christian, endometriosis has not only had a significant negative impact on my life, it has gotten worse over time. But surprisingly, my faith has grown stronger. That has been a pleasant surprise. I have found I am closer to God. Um, my faith has deepened. And while this is not a channel about faith related things per se, it is about me, and my faith is important to me. And so, while my faith did not lead to endometriosis disappearing and I living a fantastic life, it has helped me cope with the difficulty that has been endometriosis. Living with this condition has meant that I am not able to do all I want to do. It has meant that I have had to sometimes pull out of projects that were important to me, either initiated by others or sometimes even initiated by me, just because my bandwidth could not handle it. It has meant that my socializing choices are, you know, somewhat reduced. There are times I just want to go hang out with friends or go on a hike or just do something fun. And I can't because my body says no. It has meant that I have had to almost rationalize, if that's the right word, choices around education, career, my profession, what I can do, what I can't do. It has meant that I am repeatedly having to adapt my life to my changing health. Unfortunately, worsening health. Because in the past few years, the condition has worsened. And I am at the point where my doctors are recommending a radical surgery. And all this, I haven't even mentioned the side effects of the treatment you take for this condition. When you are on those hormonal injections for however many months, they can induce what is referred to as a sort of chemical menopause or something similar, which can be very uncomfortable. And unfortunately, the side effects don't necessarily stop when you stop the injections. It can take months to years for those side effects to ease off. And even apart from that, the medicines, depending on what you're taking, whether it's the painkillers or the hormonal medicines or whatever else, they can cause, of their own accord, fatigue, nausea, weight gain, water retention, fluid retention. They can impact your mood, appetite, your blood pressure. The list can go on and on. And as this condition has impacted my choices, my opportunities, it has also had some unexpected, pleasant impacts. In the sense that I have realized, I have learned to be grateful. I listed some of my, professional qualifications and bits at the beginning. I have achieved all these in spite of endometriosis. Um, I obviously believe those wouldn't be possible without the help of my God, my family, my friends, and some supportive workplaces. My family have been invaluable in being there for me. There are times we've lived in the same city, or some of us have lived in the same city or country. There are times we haven't. But whether in person or long distance by phone calls, video calls, or whatever, they have been extremely supportive. I have had to learn how to communicate to people about my condition, and this started with my family. Sometimes when I'm in pain, I go really quiet. And years ago, when I lived with my elder sister, I realized that she didn't know that when I was lying down quietly, sometimes I could be in desperate pain. And as we talked about it, I then had to articulate to her that sometimes when I'm not talking or doing anything, I'm struggling, but that's just the way I can handle what I'm going through at that time. I have also had to learn to let employers, colleagues, people I might collaborate with know that I live with this condition so that they realize that when I might be delayed in getting back to them, I'm not ignoring them. It's just that my bandwidth is somewhat limited and it can take me longer to get to things. Initially, honestly, I was not keen to talk about my condition to people outside my family because it's very private, it's gynecological, it involves periods and just being a woman, and you don't want to talk to people about that. But as it continued to have an impact on things beyond me and my family, it was impacting my residency training, it was impacting my work, it was impacting, things beyond me and my family. I learned to articulate what I was going through so that people were aware and could manage their expectations. Not with a view to giving me a cop out, but with a view to maybe realizing that I am having to live an adapted version of a life. Um, and part of the reason why I speak up about my condition is because I am choosing to advocate for women who live with severe, similar severe conditions. Why? Because I have had to repeatedly advocate for myself, and it isn't fun, right? You know, when I was doing my residency training, initially the placements were 6 monthly, then they became maybe, yearly. Or in my case, when I went part time, my yearly placements would take about a year and a half. But every time you changed placement, you had to let your new supervisor know you had this, maybe share certain reports or certain information with them so they had an idea of where you were coming from, what you were dealing with, and what limited your being able to be maybe full time, or why you had to go to appointments or that sort of thing. And you might have had to tell, at least in my case, I learned to tell, maybe the medical secretaries I worked with, the consultants I worked with, and the colleagues I worked closely with. Not for pity, but for understanding, so they knew where I was coming from when I had to do certain things a certain way. Now, remember, underlying this was a person, me. And I have been described as a go-getter. I like to get things done, right? I like to achieve things. I like to collaborate with people. I like progress. And living with this condition has meant that many times I've had to, as we say in CAT, stop and think. Not only stop and think, I've just had to stop because I'm either in too much pain to do anything, or I'm too exhausted to do anything, or I am in too much pain and extremely tired simultaneously. And that means that sometimes, even, even since I started making these YouTube videos, there are times when I plan, okay, I'm going to make a number of videos, and then my health strikes and I can't do anything for days. And it can be quite upsetting because you have planned, and for me, my experience of this condition has been that it has been very unpredictable in recent years. When I was younger, I think it was milder and it was more attuned to my cycle, so I could predict, to some degree when I would not be feeling very well and try and plan my life around that. More recently, it's gotten really severe, which is why I guess my doctors are planning radical options. It has gotten really severe, and it results in spontaneous, unpredictable episodes, symptoms, flare-ups, whatever you want to call it. And that means that while I can plan, I have learned to plan with quite a degree of flexibility because I don't know when the pain or the fatigue will strike. And keep in mind that there is a baseline level of discomfort at most times in my life, right? This is not coming from a person who feels pain-free and normal most of the time. In fact, the times when I feel normal and pain-free, exhaustion-free are so few and far between that it's a pleasant surprise when it happens. I'm having to take multiple medicines multiple times a day, dealing with the side effects of those, and so on. But while it has limited things like projects I can do and what I can get involved in, like I mentioned, it's helped me to be a better advocate for not just myself but for women like me. I have gotten involved with some of the equity work at the Royal College of Psychiatrists around women and mental health. The fantastic team there is looking at developing some resources around how to effectively, support women who live with this and other bits in terms of their mental well-being. I would like to think I have become a more empathetic person and healthcare professional because of what I live with. My life choices have been impacted. I'll give you an example. Um, as a psychiatry trainee or resident, you have a number of options to specialize. And I initially hoped to do what they call a dual specialization in medical psychotherapy and general adult psychiatry or something similar. That was having gotten my MRC psych and, finished my core training. Now, doing that would typically be 5 years full time. But by the time I started working part time, it would have taken me about 8 years. And at that point, I thought, no. I had done a few things professionally before coming to residency, and I wasn't willing to spend that much of my life just doing my specialization. And so I had to reconsider. I ended up specializing in, general adult plus liaison psychiatry. And then alongside that, I trained to become a cognitive analytic therapist. And it's interesting because right now I absolutely love cognitive analytic therapy. I can talk about it, for hours on end, and I encourage any and everyone to either become a cognitive analytic therapist or try some cognitive analytic therapy as a patient. But I wonder if my original dream had gone through of maybe doing just medical psychotherapy or medical psychotherapy and general adult psychiatry as a specialization, if my health had been more amenable to that plan, would I have ended up doing CAT? Would I have discovered the joys of CAT and collaborating with colleagues in the CAT organizations here in the UK? Would that have happened? Last year, I was privileged to be on a panel at the National Cognitive Analytic Therapy Conference in Swansea, Wales, and I also ran a workshop. Would that have happened if I had done something else? I don't know. Maybe it would have. Maybe something even better would have happened, but maybe it wouldn't have. As I have had to work part time and remotely, I have realized that many people are having to work that way. Because when I worked full time and I could always go in person, working part time was just alien. It was foreign to me. But I have had to learn how to do it. And now there are many times I wish I could work in person and full time. I have made peace with this. It's not always been the easiest. Employers and supervisors and line managers don't always know what to do with a person who is not as available as other people on the team. No matter how well meaning you are, no matter how much you've explained to them before you start the job. Um, Sometimes it can make it easy for, I don't know, I am trying to be kind. But I have seen people in those positions struggle, almost seem to struggle with what to do with me in terms of my availability and when I am boundaried about what I can do and what I can't do. But I have also learned to prioritize my well being because at first, when I would notice somewhat subtle pointers about displeasure with my reduced availability, I'd push myself. I told you I'm a go-getter. I like to achieve. I like to get things done. I would push myself to be there, to stay longer, to, be there when, you know, I might not necessarily have had to be there based on my health. And doing so led to, as you can imagine, untoward untoward impacts on my health. It led to episodes, time off. So the very thing I was trying to prevent, a lack of availability, ended up happening because I had pushed myself to try to be available, to impress the people I was working with. And so these days I try to just, manage myself, be open with the people I work with, as appropriate, and just do the best I can. I have had to think about equity in a number of ways. I am doing some equity work with the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and I have had to think about equity through a number of lenses. I wonder how I would have thought of equity if I did not live with this condition. As I have said earlier on, I am involved in preventative mental health, and that means that things like health inequalities, disparities, indices of multiple deprivation are things I think about, things I present and teach about, and things I try and, work to reduce. And I have had to think about equity not just from maybe the more apparent lenses, but also from the less obvious. So I've had to think about things around disability, women's health, reasonable adjustments, in addition to things around ethnicity related impacts and other bits. And it's important to realize that equity and fairness for all and working towards equality or equity or whatever term you choose as most appropriate can mean different things to different people at different times. And we need to be curious to listen and learn and then to be able to support people. And there's research going into things like this. So, people are working on it. I guess one thing I've learned to celebrate is the progress despite it all. I recently became accredited as a cognitive analytic therapist. I'm still basking in that, even though it was a course that took me longer than maybe the average student because I was working part time, number one. So that had an impact on how often I could do certain things. I could see my patients and clear the patient load I needed to qualify. It meant living with this condition meant that there were times I was just off sick and I couldn't engage with the course or coursework. On one occasion, when I was starting, after I finished residency and I had started working as a consultant, there was a particular role I was about to start, and while I had finished most of the academic components of the course, I had to discuss with the course organizers and say, honestly, with this new role I am starting, I don't have the bandwidth to do the role and continue seeing my cases and, continue with the bits of the CAT course. CAT is cognitive analytic therapy. I said I have to put those bits on hold and focus on this role. And they gracefully understood and supported me. And after, getting into the role and, finding some stability, I went back to the course and picked my patients and continued. But it meant that it took longer than it should have. Something that, can be upsetting, but you make peace with it. And now I'm accredited and I'm delighted. I have had to learn how to adapt things in my life and my home around my health. I have had to, prioritize my mental well-being because sometimes when one is off sick, it's easy when you can't go to work and you can't be busy to think about the impact of what's going on, all the losses, all the things you have the capability and the competence to do, but your body is stopping you from doing it. And it's a stressful condition, and I somehow made a stressful career choice in healthcare. And those two together have been an interesting mix. But I will acknowledge my privilege. As a medical person, I am aware of the options. And maybe as a result of that, I have better access than others might. I have also been able to access supportive and preventative mental health care, sometimes without even planning it. I'll go on a little detour there to tell you a little bit about training as a cognitive analytic therapist. And please, if you're interested in it, come talk to me, right? Also, the consultancy I founded, we are offering cognitive analytic therapy informed well-being type sessions and support. So you can see that, I believe in the model. Um, you probably notice I get a little excited and happy each time I talk about cats. So when you train as a cognitive analytic therapist, you need to go through your own personal 16-session cognitive analytic therapy as, the patient, be on the other side of the divide. And on the one hand, that's part of the reason why I advocate, you know, for preventative mental health, amongst many other reasons. Because anecdotal evidence suggests that the personal therapy people who train to be cat therapists go through is very beneficial, right? Talking to, colleagues, classmates, while we did not go through therapy because we were ill or diagnosed with a mental illness, we all tended, at least all the people I spoke to and I, we found it, how do I put it? For me, and for the people I talk to, we seem to find it really beneficial in optimizing our mental well-being. in ways that were sometimes surprising, which is funny because before you can train as a cognitive analytic therapist, you are expected to have a mental health core profession or something similar. So most of my classmates were psychiatrists, psychiatry trainees, psychologists, people with double doctorates, people who are already therapists in other modalities, mental health nurses. So these were mainly highly trained and highly intelligent people, right? Who had been working in mental health for years and years. And yet, for most of us, at least for the ones I spoke to, we found it beneficial. And so I do believe in mental health optimization. I do believe that if you can, accessing the right kind of therapy, even when you're not mentally ill, can be a good thing for you. Anyway, back to endometriosis. So since the cognitive analytic therapy course requires we go through personal therapy, I did during my course. And because I was struggling really hard with endometriosis at the time, the principles of cat therapy were invaluable in helping me find some stability and balance and in making sense of it all. And now, when I think of people who don't have access to that kind of mental health intervention, I feel bad for them. I had access to that because I'm a mental health professional and I was training in this and interested in it. And while I did learn a lot, it ended up being some form of preventative mental health care for me, a woman with a severe gynecological condition. How many people have access to that? Anyways, I should start rounding up this video at some point. Um, I've talked about part-time working, remote working. I've had to learn how to pace myself, you know. I've had to learn how to do the things I can, not necessarily the things I ought, which has been really difficult. Because it turns out that the things I ought as a woman living with this condition are not always what I thought they were. I have had to redefine some of these things. I've had to learn how to chunk tasks. Do a bit, rest, do a bit, rest. And just chunk things in life generally. And as I mentioned, I've explored unexpected pathways which have ended up, giving joy. I've learned to advocate for others. I've had to mourn the losses related to endo, as we shorten it to. But I've also learned to maximize the health I do have and try not to focus on the health I do not have. And so when I can, I juice life for all it's worth on the good days. I've also made peace with sharing my story, as I am now doing. I've learned to let things go. I have joined a number of choirs at different times, whether it's in church or, in the community. And there have been some fantastic community choirs I've joined where I've had fun, gotten to sing, and just, had a lovely, non-work element of my life, which provided, joy, laughter, and helped my mental well-being. But I have had to eventually leave these groups because my health reared its head and I couldn't cope with the regular practices or, meetings and presentations. It didn't mean that there wasn't a time of joy and happiness. Yes, I did enjoy some of those for a time, but then they were truncated. Some of my struggles are trying somewhat unsuccessfully to keep endo out of conversations, especially seeing as it impacts virtually everything I do or how I am able or not able to do things. I've had to struggle with not overdoing the slices of seeming normalcy because you just want to lean into it and enjoy it for all it's worth. I've had to learn to deliberately stop and rest, even when I'm not having a flare-up. I've had to learn how to at least attempt to positively deal with long periods of unwellness. I have found it challenging to sometimes explain to well meaning people that severe endometriosis and the related fatigue do not always respond to typical health interventions and suggestions. I have had to apologize repeatedly for the impact on timelines. I've had to remind myself how exceptional I am. I am an exceptional woman. By the grace of God and the support of loved ones and a lot of hard work on my part, I have achieved a lot. And sometimes living with a condition like this can cloud that. And your world can shrink and become so small. And it's just you and this condition that's battering you into submission, battering you into sorrow and sadness. And sometimes you have to remind yourself, yes, I might be struggling with this now, but there are other positive things I have achieved in my life and continue to achieve. I've also had to learn to, I don't know, realize and to remind myself how difficult it can be to wrap my own mind around how debilitating this condition is and what it has done and continues to do to me, who is living with it. Because when I do so, it's easier to make space for people around me who are well meaning but struggle to understand what my life can be like. My medical background has been both a boon and a bane. Because while it helps me understand things, provides access to certain things, sometimes you don't want to know as much as you could. I deliberately stop myself from increasing my knowledge about endometriosis sometimes because I go down all the rabbit holes and read about all the possibilities, and it's a little too much, because you start to worry. It's also been a challenge to ensure that my lack of health is not equated to a lack of competence, diligence, or that sort of thing. Pleasant surprises have been stronger faith, realizing that my story can help others. It's not all negative. There was a time it just felt like a waste. Why in the world would the good Lord let me live with such a debilitating condition? What's the benefit? What does it add to the world? It's, just a waste. When I could be doing things, saving lives, contributing to society. But I have realized that sometimes contributing to society is by sharing your story and supporting others who are going through other struggles. Because our struggles have a lot of common threads. It might not even, somebody else's struggle might not have to do with health, but just the fact that the person struggles and I struggle, we can find common ground and support each other. So it has been a pleasant surprise to realize that my story can help others. The new paths, some of which I've shared, have been a pleasant surprise as well. The blessing of music and songs. Songs have been amazing in seeing me and supporting me through what I've gone through. I am learning gratitude for the seemingly mundane. I am more appreciative of life and fun and laughter and energy and good days and progress. I celebrate small wins, even if it's just a day when I manage to get up, dress up, and go out for something or the other. Many times I might get to an event late, because as I'm getting ready, I'm struggling with pain and exhaustion. And many times I end up cancelling because I can't even get to the event. But when I get to go to the event, when I'm able to dress up and go to the event, it's a big deal. I go, I enjoy it, I take photos, and I just celebrate the fact that, endo didn't win that day. I am grateful for the option of remote working, remote church, and remote all sorts of things. I have learned it's okay to beg off multiple things, sometimes repeatedly, even if I don't like it. I have learned to make peace with the imperfections of life. Listening to my earlier videos, you might have heard that I can be a perfectionist. And I have learned to let the imperfections of life be. Because I can't fix everything, especially when I don't have the health or energy to. And as a Christian, I have realized that the Bible verse, and I believe it's Romans 8:28, is true. All things really do work for my good, even the things that are not pleasant. I am exceedingly grateful for my family, my immediate family, and my extended family, my friends, and loved ones, and people who just come through for me or have come through for me at one time or the other. I am grateful for charities like Endometriosis UK and other groups. I am grateful for endometriosis user groups online, support groups on Facebook or online. I can't remember all their names, but sometimes just reading the experiences of other women and realizing you're not alone, or learning tips or sharing tips with others has been invaluable. I am grateful for some amazing healthcare professionals I have met in the course of my journey. I am grateful that I can show up at all to life. I am grateful for the adaptations I have been able to make to my life, which means I'm able to function to some degree. I have learned to be grateful for my go-getter personality, which is probably why, well, part of the reason why I've been able to make progress despite this condition. I am grateful for some really supportive organizations that I have worked in. And I am grateful for the opportunity to be able to talk to you. So that's me attempting to summarize a bit of my experience of endometriosis. Maybe I'll do other videos about it this endometriosis month. Maybe I won't. Feel free to ask questions. I'll try and post links related to endometriosis in the chat. And while this is this has not been about preventative mental health as much as my other videos, it's more about sharing me and some of the stuff I have struggled with. I will say what I say in my other videos. Remember that this video does not constitute healthcare. If you're struggling with your health, physical, mental, please make sure you see an appropriate healthcare provider. And of course, prevention saves lives, and that includes mental health prevention. It's been lovely sharing with you. I hope it helps someone somewhere. And if you're a woman living with endometriosis, I know how lonely it can get. If you ever want to talk to someone else, let me know in the chat. And even if it's not that you're somebody living with endometriosis, if it's something else and you just want to talk to someone, let me know. While I do run a consultancy and there are paid sessions I encourage people to book, I also am a human being and I live on planet Earth, and sometimes it's just helpful to talk to people outside the business consideration and just try and help each other. Just listen and be there. So anyways, I gotta go now. Lovely talking to you all. See you in my next video. And please spread awareness of endometriosis. And the next woman you meet with this condition, please be curious, be supportive, and don't constitute a problem for her. See you guys around. Bye.